Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And there just seems to be a lot of labels nowadays that we give ourselves or that society assigns to people. And sometimes we can get caught up in those labels and lose track of who we are and not really see the people around us for the individuals they are. And that's what I want to talk about this week. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so let's break this down. There have always been labels and throughout history that people have assigned to themselves and that societies assign to individuals or groups. And those labels can and are effective in many ways, but there comes a point where an excess of labeling can cause people to lose track of themselves or to see themselves as the label. Labels are, for the most part, transitory. There are immutable characteristics that people will be grouped in or labeled. For example, gender, ethnicity, um, age. You can't change your age. Sorry. I wish. No. But it's just there are certain immutable characteristics that can be used as labels. As much as I balked at it for ages, I will always be a millennial, and that's just something I'm going to have to accept. But that said, there are also labels that we don't have to use to define us. There are labels that are roles. They're not actually labels per se, but roles that we have or can choose. So, what's gotten me down this little rabbit hole? Let's get to let's not put the horse before the cart and get to where this all came from. Recently, I ran across two labels that initially I thought I understood, and then the more it was explained to me, I realized I had not perceived the same way as others had. These two labels are trad wife and boy mom. And there's more to it, but I'm going to just talk about them in general. Trad wife, I just thought was a shortening of traditional wife. And to me, that's just someone like I guess I've not still to this day heard a clear explanation. Some people claim that a trad wife is someone who just doesn't work and is only in the home and only takes care of the home. And I was like, but I consider myself a traditional wife, but I have a side hustle and I have a degree and I have worked, but I don't primarily work full time. And then there was like people getting really upset because they're like, "Oh, the trad wife thing, you're making it look so glamorous. That's going to convince girls to do this, and then they're not going to be able to provide for themselves if the relationship doesn't work out." And again, I was sitting there confused because I was like, "But I have a degree and I'm a traditional wife-ish, as much as a military spouse is. Um, I'm perfectly capable of providing for myself if I need to. And I know that there are some that don't have college degrees, maybe don't have as much job experience, but being able to provide for yourself if something doesn't work out is a choice. I've grown up with my mom and my mom's family of generations of moms, wives, but who still had side hustles and careers and worked from home or cottage businesses and helped provide an income for their families. And so I just I was like, So I don't get this. 'Cause basically it's been like this now in my family for 4 or 5 generations, and it's all because of an accident that happened ages ago. Um, great-great-grandmother had to come up with a way to help provide for her family because her husband was severely injured, and did. And so her daughter, my great-grandmother, was taught a skill. She was more or less a traditional wife. I don't think she really worked a ton out of the home. But then my grandmother, owned and operated several businesses of her own. She never had a college degree. And so, and her husband passed away relatively early when my mother was still very young, and my grandmother still had kids at home. And so it was good that my grandmother had already been used to having a job and thinking creatively and being an entrepreneur, because when she was widowed, she was able to still step up and figure out something to do to take care of her kids that were at home. And my mom went off to college. My grandmother had always wanted to go to college, but it wasn't a practical thing for her family when she was young. And so when her daughter wanted to go off to college, she was like, "Okay, find a way to do it." And my mom did. She found a way to get off to college and got a degree and was able to do that. And my grandmother, I remember her telling me how proud she was of my mom for pursuing an education because that's what she wanted and just finding a way to make it happen. My mom took care of us kids, provided for us, and was perfectly fine and encouraging of me to get a degree. When I got married just before I finished college, she was a little concerned I wouldn't finish my degree. And she even cornered my then fiance, now husband, about it and was like, "Hey, she needs to finish." And he's like, "Of course she needs to finish, and education's important." And he was a huge support, and my mom were both huge supports in encouraging me to finish up my degree. And it was right around when I was finishing college that we found out we were going to have our first kid. So it all kind of worked out. And so this whole hullabaloo, this upheaval about, is this safe and is this whatever, I was just like, dude, just let people be people. Like, I love being a mostly stay-at-home mom. I love being able to play with my kids and have those conversations as I get my kids to and from school and help them pick what activities and help them with their homework and making meals from scratch. I don't always, trust me, there are days where we definitely have frozen food, but or eat out, but that's not so often now because of the economy. But I like cooking. I really do. I'm actually an okay baker. I'm not a fabulous baker. I've never been a fabulous baker. My husband is a better baker than me because during COVID, he decided to learn how to bake, and he's got a natural gift. So that's fabulous. And sometimes I will do things from scratch. Like one of the people that was getting a lot of flack was a influencer, TikTok influencer, who is showing how sometimes she makes cereal for her kids instead of buying it. You know what? I like making baby food for my baby beside instead of buying it. First of all, it's cheaper. Second of all, I know the quality of the food and I know there's less additives because of reasons with family health. I like to avoid refined sugar as much as possible. And I can do that when I make things from scratch. We baked Easter bread, Italian Easter bread, from scratch for Easter. I spent a couple of days making homemade dye from food scraps to dye the eggs. And we made the bread from scratch. It was so much fun. The kids were on spring break, so it was a great activity, super educational because we're talking about chemistry and all of that. And it was just a blast. Do I do that all the time? No. And, anybody who knows me knows that I am not a comfortable bread baker. I do not bake all of my family's bread. But occasionally there are things that I am comfortable doing, and I'll do that. And then the next one I ran into was boy mom. I have known a lot of fabulous boy moms, one of which is my mother in law, and several friends who have mostly or all boys. And they are great, incredible women. And so I'd always thought of a boy mom as like, Joe from Little Women when she has her whole little school that she does. I'd always kind of thought of that sort of thing. And so when I heard the trend boy mom was trending and that sort of thing, I was like, okay, cool. More power to great moms who teach their sons to be providers and then I started seeing some of the TikTok videos and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I've got two girls and two boys. I'm a boy mom and a girl mom. And I was not comfortable with the way some of these moms were acting like, oh, I'm going to teach my son to cook so he's not impressed by your daughter and her takeout. And I'm like, say what? I'm teaching my boys how to cook so that they can help their wife and feed their kids when their wife is recovering from an illness or just had a baby, so he can be a supportive husband. And so while he's looking for that awesome wife that I hope he finds, that he knows how to take care of himself and not, be malnourished because he's eating junk food all the time. So I was just like, huh, what? But evidently, this is something where there are people who are labeling themselves like this, but it's not an uplifting thing. I want, I'm a boy mom. I want to be the kind of boy mom where I'm raising boys who respect women and are able to find a healthy relationship with a fabulous woman who they love and adore and who treats them with respect and they can treat with respect and they can grow together as a team and have a fabulous family and be happy and fulfilled. That would be my dream. That my dream. What happens, happens, and my kids will, when they're adults, make their choices. And I hope those choices that they make them happy. But my view as my job as a mother is to help raise my children so that they are happy, healthy, functioning adults who are contributing to society and just being good human beings. Well adjusted, happy, joyful human beings. Well, maybe not always happy, but joyful. Like they find purpose in their lives. Because life isn't always happy. That's just a fact. But it just got me thinking of again, back to my mother in law, who I would, in a lot of ways, consider a traditional wife, but was a nurse, worked my husband's entire life or childhood, and wasn't always there for every day because she was a nurse, but she raised with her husband fabulous boys, quite a few boys, who are gentlemen, who are kind, who are considerate, who are hardworking, who want to provide. And I'm so grateful for the fabulous job she did raising my husband. And I'm going to be completely straight up. My husband is totally a mommy's boy. Like, I'm not saying you can't be a mommy's boy. He is, and I love him for it. We've had to establish some healthy boundaries with his mama boyness, and he owns it. He totally owns that he's a mama's boy. He is proud of that. And you know what? I'm glad he has a fabulous relationship with his mother. That is good. And he also treats me with love and respect. When we first got married, sometimes he'd forget and call his mom when he had exciting news before he called me. We had to have a little talk about that, but it wasn't the end of the world. And I love my mama's boy. He's great. So it's not like they can't even be mama's boys. Basically, be a boy mom, but let's teach our boys to be powerful but kind leaders. Let's teach them to be protectors. Let's teach them to be respectful. And you know what? Same thing as a girl mom. Dude, I want my daughters to be able to find a guy who respects them, who treats them with dignity, who is their best friend, who they can work with as a partner and as a team, and they can have a happy, healthy relationship. And I hope and pray that that wonderful person they hopefully someday find has a mother who is going to love and adore and cherish them just like I do. That's what I want. And I don't think those are completely unrealistic. There are, like I said in the beginning, there's a difference between our immutable characteristics, which we can and do get labeled as. I will forever be Irish and Italian. I'm never going to run away from that. It's in my DNA, it's part of who I am. And you know what? I can ignore that label if I choose, or I can embrace that label if I choose. But my role of wife, my role of mother, my role are roles I chose. Those aren't labels, those are roles. Those are roles and responsibilities I have chosen. And how anyone chooses to view my execution of those roles, that's a them thing, not me. And I also have roles that I didn't choose per se because they're immutable. I'm a daughter. I'm always going to be a daughter. I didn't have a choice in that, but I am always going to be grateful for my mother and my stepfather. And I'm a sister and I am grateful for my siblings and the relationships I have built and am trying to continue to grow and build with them. Those are roles. And then there's all those other silly things or things we choose. Some of them we choose, some are transitional, some people throw at us. I am a religious Christian. That is a label I have chosen. I have a political party, which is my business and no one else's. And that's something I've chosen. But I don't really feel like I should be treated differently because I have made those choices. I try, not always perfectly, but I try to see people for who they are and not the labels they have had thrown on them by society or that they have chosen. Because sometimes we will lump people in big groups and label them and forget that they are individuals. Forget that not everyone is like that. I might disagree with a lot of people who have a certain perspective. But just because I disagree with or some or all of the individuals who proclaim that specific view on that specific topic doesn't mean that we don't have a lot in common in other ways. There's a lot. And I feel like as military wives, that is one of the things that is a label. Military wife, it's a label. I didn't 100% choose for myself, but I supported my husband in that choice. And that is a label I will own straight up. It's my brand, Life of a Military Wife, because I'm proud of that label. I am proud of my husband. I am proud of his service to our country. And I love our country and I want our country to be a good place. And I know that I have a part in that. I have a part and I have a stake in making this country a good place, not only today, not only tomorrow, but in the future. And part of that is as a mom because I am helping to raise the next generation of Americans. And the United States of America will be what it will be based upon my kids and their cohort, their generation. And so that's a huge responsibility. Basically, what I'm coming down to, and I'm going to just wrap it up with this. There's a condition called face blind. It's where you can't recognize faces. It can happen because of an accident, or it can happen, I believe you can be born with it as well. But basically, you can't even recognize your face in the mirror. And so they have to memorize things about people to recognize the people. They have to memorize things about themselves to be able to recognize themselves. And sometimes we can, with all of these labels, become face blind. Like I was saying before, we get so wrapped up in those labels, in memorizing these things about people, that we don't see them as the person they are. I am so much more than all of the labels people might apply to me. And I hope that people will give me the opportunity to show them who I am by my choices and the way I act. And then they can make whatever judgment call they want. And I will try to offer that same courtesy to others. I will try to stop and see them as a person, as an individual, and not as their labels. So, like I said, there are labels we choose. There are labels we control. There are labels we don't choose and we don't control. And sometimes there are labels that we allow that aren't helpful. So before you stop and just accept some label that society or someone has thrown on you, stop and think about it. Do I have control? Like, is this is this label in my control or out of my control? And do I want it or do I not want it? And then even if you accept it, it doesn't have to be the sole definition of who you are. I'll admit, I do like old school Star Wars. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I'll own that. I'm a bookworm. I'll own that. But that doesn't mean I like every book. And it doesn't mean I'm going to have the same opinion on Star Wars as maybe another Star Wars fan. I can own those labels and still be an individual. So, before we jump to conclusions about the people around us, and maybe we're trying to make new friends because we've been PCS'd to a new place or whatnot, with all of the crazy politicalness that is going to and has already begun this year, instead of throwing people into categories based on their perceived opinions, let's get to know them for who they are as a person and treat them with respect and dignity as a fellow member of humanity. I hope that this might have shed some light. If you've been hearing some of those labels too, and you're like, hey, man, what do those mean? I don't know. Hopefully that maybe cleared it up a little bit for you. Maybe it didn't. But it's just been on my mind a bit about the importance of those sorts of things and how maybe they aren't always as important. And maybe sometimes they are. Anyway, I want to just encourage you all to continue to just be that force for good. We, as a military community, or just as people in general, have the ability to set the tone for the society and communities that we are a part of. And we can choose to be proactive and positive and kind and considerate. And if we do, it will be a blessing to those around. So be the good you want to see in the world. I know it's someone else's catchphrase and someone else coined it, not me, but it's still true. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife.